All right, it's 1 o'clock. How's everybody's MAGFest going? Hell yeah. First of all, I want to say thank you for spending your Friday night here with me. I know there's a lot of other things going on in the arcade, so I really appreciate everybody who's here. This thing's going to be about 30 minutes, might not be the full hour, so you should guys be able to get out, and enjoy the rest of the con. And we're just going to go from there. So, welcome to my panel. End of service. All good things must end. So, we're going to cover several things throughout this panel. First, what's end of service? Why should you even care about end of service? What causes end of service? Then we're going to go through kind of an end of service hall of fame, some games that met their demise and some games that probably should no longer be running, but we'll think about that later. What you can do to stop, not forest fires, but end of service, and life after end of service. Your favorite game ends, then what? What do you do? So, what is end of service? End of service is when a live service game is no longer supported by the developers. Servers are shut down, whatever else happens. Basically, games are no longer playable in their expected format. Live service games, you can't have end of service without service, right? So live service games are video games designed to be continuously updated for a long period of time and then monetized via microtransactions, cosmetics, game enhancements, or whatever. So all those day one patches you see, all those games as a service models, that's what a live service game is. There's several different types of live service games. And the first one you might not really think too much. It's like a purchased game with company-held assets. So the game is purchased, it's owned by you, you have the disc, you have whatever cartridge, but a major aspect of the expected way you would play that game is held by the company, generally through like a private server. A really good example of that's like Call of Duty. You go, you buy your disc, you put in your Xbox 360, and you go on multiplayer, and the servers aren't available because they're no longer run. Other things like the Nintendo eShop. You bought a physical D3DS, you have it, but the eShop, it's no longer available, right? Next thing is free games. Yeah, thanks Nintendo. Free games with microtransactions. So the game's free to play, and then they use the microtransactions to monetize and continue support of the game. The microtransactions are usually battle passes, skins, cosmetics. I'm sure if you're sitting in this room, you are very well aware of what they are. Good examples, Overwatch, the brand new Marvel Rivals, Valorant, CSGO if you don't buy the $15 version to not deal with hackers. And then lastly, it's really a subset of the free games with microtransactions, but because of how often you see it, are gacha games. So subset of the above, but it focuses on a gambling mechanic based off of the Japanese gachapon, where instead of just being battle passes or skins, you're going to spend money on a fake little raffle box, and you hopefully get a weapon or character of your choice. Genshin Impact, Zenless Zone Zero, Honkai Star Rail, Fire Emblem Heroes, Epic 7, Blue Archive, Dragalia Lost, World Flipper, Arknights, you name it, those types of games. So, why should you even care? Why are you here? It's 1 a.m., it's a con. Why should you care about end of service, right? The game you're playing is still available. Well, first off, raise your hand if you play a live service game at the moment. Look around, right? Everybody's basically playing a live service game. You might even not think about it. If your game gets patched while you're actively playing it, it's a live service game. And I mean, you can keep them up, but keep your hand raised or put them back up if you ever spent money on a live service game, right? So with these 2 bullet points, right? You're investing time and you're investing money into a live service game. And in the year of our Lord and Savior, 2025, games as a service and live service games are basically here to stay, and it's going to be basically every title that you play. So, what causes end of service? That's really like a big, important point. Well, it's very simple. Persona 5 collabs, pause, end of service. If your game of choice collabs with Persona 5, it's done. You're on a clock. It's over.
Hold on. Think again. Don't you know what just happened?
What was that? However, just not yet. But all these games end of service after the Persona 5 plan. If you see it, run from it. Stop spending money. It's over. Pay your dues.
Seems like it break back out of nowhere. It's over.
Now it really causes end of service, right? Persona 5, they basically collab with every single game under the sun. Of course, some of them are going to fail. That's not really it. But you'll see the Persona 5 curse in online discourse. But what really causes end of service? Well, player count, right? You don't have enough players, you're not going to make a bunch of money. What affects player count? Just new games, right? You play in the one game forever, becomes boring. Oh, here's Marvel Rivals. Well, I'm going to stop playing Overwatch, I'm going to Marvel Rivals. Well, now the player count on Overwatch is dwindling. Tech failures. If your game doesn't launch or it can't be played, people aren't going to play it, right? And social backlash. Sometimes games do things that they shouldn't, and that negatively affects the player count. And then obviously profitability, right? If the game has to make money. What affects that? Clairvoyance. What's clairvoyance? Well, a lot of live service games have servers in like Japan or Korea, and they're 2, 3, 4, 7 years ahead of an English server. So we know everything that's going to happen. We know what characters are going to be meta, what characters are useless, when are they going to come out. So that affects profitability. If I don't have to spend money because I know it's coming up, then, right, we don't want to worry about that. The game can be too generous, right? If the game just gives you rolls and rolls and rolls and you don't get to spend any money, well, they're not going to make any money. And poor pricing structure. So even if they have packs, if they're so not valuable for the player, you're not going to spend money. Like Epic 7, for example. I think like their packs are just ass. Like, period. Like there is no value in their packs. Lately they've been a little bit better, but generally it's like I'm not going to spend $100 for like a 20 roll, right? It's just not worth it. And these are connected, right? You need players to make profit. And if all these things that affect your profit make it so that it's not fun to play, you're not going to have players, and vice versa. So, we're going to go through some well-known end of services and some games that are still kicking. Club Penguin, right? That's a live service game, right? It had a pretty good run, 12 years. And then it was bought by Disney, and Disney does what Disney does and axed it. Tried to put out another version that lasted like a year, and it's over, right? I think you can still play some Club Penguins through some other channels, but not really.
It's like private servers.
Yeah. So cause of death, dwindling player base, right? Flash computer games became kind of obsolete. It's not necessarily a Flash game, but, right? The technology of Club Penguin just didn't catch up. So, next one. Pretty well-known one very recently. Concord, right? Live service game. Actually, you had to pay $60 for it, which is just god-awful, right? Time to end of service, 14 days. You got Club Penguin, 12 years. You could run on a potato, and Concord. Cause of death, the game just sucked, right? It was a bad game. Sony was planning for this hero shooter like way too ahead in advance, where it's like just not the right market for it. Chaos Saga, I was doing some research. 26 hours. Basically, as you can see, just plagiarism, right? There's Kirito. There's the guy from whatever, Bokutachiwa! Right? 3 a.m. you wake up in your hotel room and and then I believe there's excessive maintenance on top of all that. Dead on arrival. This one came up. Wave! Namin Nori Boys. It's like a husbando collector about surfers. The art's pretty cool, right? Time to end of service, depending on how you see it, one day or maybe a little bit later, they had the game released. Everyone played it, and then there was maintenance after the first day. And then the maintenance continued. And the maintenance continued. And then they shut off the game. So that kind of fell into the failure to launch category from earlier. Now my next one is probably the most egregious example of end of service anyone will ever see. There's a good chance you already know about it. Love Live School Idol Festival 2. Miracle Live. I have no idea what they were thinking about. I actually gotta look in for this one. Here's their tweet. We are excited to break the news to you that the global version of Love Live School Idol Festival 2 Miracle Live is launching soon in February 2024. However, we also want to inform you that the global version will close its doors on May 31st, 2024. It was dead before it even launched. 0 days, 0 hours, 0 seconds. Cause of death, not too sure. There is some discourse as to that the mobile music game market is just that cutthroat. If you're not Hatsune Miku, you might as well just give up, right?
Agreed.
That's the idea. Next one, near and dear to my heart. Princess Connect Redive. Time to end of service, 1 year. Cause of death, Crunchyroll. All my homies hate Crunchyroll, right? So a lot of mobile games, they have a developer. So the was developed by Cygames. Love Cygames. I'll give them every dollar that I make. But then there is the publisher who actually publishes the game in that region. And so Crunchyroll published Princess Connect Redive for the English server. However, Crunchyroll just completely mishandled the IP because Cygames are notoriously generous. So a lot of pulls. And we had 3 or 4 years clairvoyance, right? So we knew every character, when they were going to come out, who was good, who was bad. Obviously, if you want to pull for the waifu, you pull for the waifu, right? And now most publishers will actually run an accelerated schedule. Hey, if this event was supposed to be 2 weeks, they run it for 10 days, right? They try to catch up over time, so that way the clairvoyance issue becomes a thing of the past. You put a little bit more pressure on the players' wallets. But Crunchyroll didn't do that, and then they just axed the game. It's still pumping on the JP server. They're doing great. So it's not that it can't make money, it's just that Crunchyroll sucks. All right, so now we're going to go into some games that surprisingly still exist. We're going to start with Mabinogi. It's a Korean MMORPG. It's been running for 16 to 20 years, depending on which server you're looking at. It still looks like it was made 16 to 20 years ago. It's on Steam. They actually just enjoyed their 20th anniversary. They released a new class. You can play it on Steam. The fact that it still exists and it's making money enough to be run, surprise. It's just one dude. His entire paycheck each month just goes to Mabinogi. That's all it is. This next one, I've played it. I don't expect anybody to actually care about it, but Trove. It's like this Minecraft-esque explorer game. The game sucks, right? It's fun, but it sucks. I would never recommend anybody to play it. But it's on 10 years now, and I think one dude's in his corner spending all of his money because I have no idea how it's not completely abandoned. Another one, you've probably seen it in the mobile market. You've probably heard of it. Summoner's War, right? It's an online, tactical RPG. 10 years it's been running since release, and not only that, but it's been strong. It earned $9 million in December this past month, and it's collabing this month with Demon Slayer. So it's cooking. I'm surprised, but it's cooking. So, right, you're here. We learned about what end of service was. What causes it. What can you do to stop end of service, right? Well, there's only one answer. You pull out that adult card, and you start swiping. And you swipe, and then you turn to your friends, and you make them swipe. And you spend all your money on your game. That's all you can do. Huh? Possibly. But then you're like, hey. Then your friends get into it. They can get their friends into it. But, hey. All right, calm down. So, right, but the title, right? End of service, all good things must end, right? So, the real answer is you can't, right? Your favorite live service game at some point will end. So when spending time, and especially money, keep that in mind. Spend responsibly and within budget. Now we're going to take a very quick, serious note. If you or anybody you know have a gambling issue, here's the gambling hotline that you can call. Sometimes all it takes is a phone call. When Fire Emblem Heroes first came out, I mean, I was still living in my parents' basement at an internship in college or whatever, but I spent like $900 each month on Fire Emblem Heroes. And then I got a call, and my mom's like, hey, why is there 3 $900 charges to Nintendo? And I was too embarrassed to say JPEGs. And since then, my gambling addiction was curbed. So, you know, spend responsibly. Sometimes all it takes is a phone call to get you where you gotta go. All right, so, serious part over. Life after end of service, right? They close the door on your game. Best case scenario, offline version. Right here, last November, or this past November, Animal Crossing Pocket Camp just ended. Nintendo, luckily, made a offline version of the game. Full game, you spend $10 or $20 if you miss the window, and you get the full game for basically ever as long as your phone can support it. This is like the best possible situation. You get to keep playing your game, everything's great, everything's honky-dory. Sometimes there's an offline version, but it's not quite the full game. So, for example, Konosuma Fantastic Days just ended service, and they actually made 5 separate apps to hold character stories and character arts and in-game art. I don't think there's any gameplay, but once again, at least the developer cared enough to say, hey, we know you care about this game, this IP. We're going to make some apps. We're going to make it so you can hold on to the stuff that you care about. So, that's the best case scenario. So we're going to move on to the realistic situation, right? That there is no offline version. So, what do you do at end of service announcement? I'm going to do there's a 3-step plan. I'm going to do the first step. I expect you guys to help me with step 2 and 3. Step 1, lie down. Step 2, try not to cry.
Crying.
Step 3,
Cry
a lot, right? It's going to happen. You're going to be sad. You've been playing it for years. It's one of those things. Every day after work, you log on, you play for 20 minutes, an hour. Maybe on the weekends, you go real hard. You're going to have a lot of emotions attached with that. It's okay to cry. It happened to me. But then what, right? You got to pick yourself up because this is baby stuff, right? So, step 1, buy merch, especially if it's an IP that doesn't exist outside of that game. Like Animal Crossing, there's going to be Animal Crossing merch. But, for example, Dragalia Lost. Well, that's gone, right? That's done. So you got to go buy your merch as soon as you can. Alchemy Stars just ended service as of like today, right? So that's its own IP. So you got to go to Japan or do whatever, get your Alchemy Stars merch right now. Oh, I saw a couple, I think, online. You might be able to, but I got all the soundtracks and the art books, so I'm very happy about that. Next, start saving assets. Screenshots. Screenshot, take screen recordings, do whatever you need to do. Data mine, rip assets, right? Do whatever you can to retain that information from that game that you care about so much. And then lastly, look into private servers. Check the subreddits, check the discords. There's probably a group of like-minded individuals on that game that you're like, hey, we gotta preserve this game. So the best way is usually private servers. You can rip the APK, you can store it somewhere, they can do some patching, you can get it on a private server. So we're gonna go through what I'd say is a winner story for an end of service that we followed kind of these steps with. Dragalia Lost and Later Found, right? Dragalia Lost was a mobile RPG developed by Cygames and published by Nintendo. Game ran for about 4 years until end of service. End of service was kind of caused by a couple things. The major story kind of reached its conclusion. They were able to tell the story, which was awesome. They didn't have to cut it short. It was a perfect ending. Once again, Cygames, super generous, so less earning potential. And then I believe when it first came out, Nintendo, being litigious as it usually is, sued the Shiro Neko project, which was a very popular IP in Japan at the time, due to the controls of the game. And if you have an RPG on a phone, there's really only one way to control it. Use your thumb and you move your character around. Where they sued them for that. And the JP market basically shunned Dragalia Lost because of that. So it could have maybe lived a little bit longer if they'd had that really strong JP market. But alas. But and even though end of service was announced, the subreddit banded together. They made Discord servers. They ripped all the assets, and there are not one, but 2 private servers for Dragalia Lost that you can currently play. One of them is a pure experience with no changes, and then the other server, they're kind of taking their own liberties to buff certain characters, nerf certain characters, even try to add additional characters into the game that we never got to see. So getting a community like that is really like the best possible situation, because these companies, they don't care about you as a gamer, right? They care about your money. Some of them do care about the IP. Luckily, Nintendo protected, the Animal Crossing, but save the assets, save the games, make the private servers, play the games that you love all your time that you can. So, we're going to end up on one last little bit. It's a cry for help. So I got this mobile game that I really like, and I want you all to play it so that we can get that player base up and get those funds going. Counterside is a linear tower defense where you deploy counters or espers, soldiers, and machines to defeat like kind of these corrupted alien-looking things. It's linear where it's like there's a base on one end, a base on the other end, and you deploy units. The game's both developed and published by Studio B-Side, and while they are working on the project, that's their only item. So end of services doesn't seem very likely because it's their one, bread and butter thing. Story's super well written, translated very good, and the art style's very nice. It's out on Google Play, iOS, and Steam. So you got a Steam Deck or anything, you don't want to put it on your phone, get on your Steam Deck. And then, as of right now, there's a collab with Is It Wrong to pick up Girls in a Dungeon. So if you like that IP, now's a good time to pick it up. And then here's just some art. Like, it's not chibi or anything. It's really high quality art in the game. The stills are really nice. The live 2Ds are really nice, and the actual in-game sprites are really high quality. You see a lot of current mobile games that come out, they're chibis all the way down, and sometimes they do it right, and a lot of times you could see how cheap it is. So it's really, really nice that they have all these really unique characters with really great art. Download it. It's really fun. It's pretty generous. There's a lot of guides and stuff on how to complete stuff. So, overall, that's my presentation, right? Thank you all for coming. I do stream, so if you like my commentary or anything, you can follow me on twitch.tv/blowfish619. I play like Genshin Impact, Zenless Zone Zero on it. I'll play some Counterside, other stuff. If there's any questions or comments about the presentation? Yeah, because they could access that, and they could. Mm-hmm.
They can just say, I did something once. So archiving these games preserve a work history for people that are incredibly underpaid and are trying so hard to work in an industry that's not like that.
That is
Super important.
absolutely true. Any other comments, questions? Anybody excited for any roles or anything?
Regarding private servers.
Yes.
Is that really an option for console games that don't have discords?
I believe so. It's probably a little bit harder because it might be like that you have to run your own private server and then connect probably via like a hardwire cable to it to kind of access those features. But there are ways. It's just a little bit more difficult. But like I know like even like the 3DS, there's ways you could still like connect to a private server remotely. It's just extra steps throughout. And then unfortunately, I'm not like super big in the tech stuff, even though. But there are ways to make console games work in a similar type format. It's just you're not gonna have probably as big of a player base, but they do have methods. Yeah, yeah. So like there's ways to do it. I think even like some of the Melee games, you can get like online stuff to do stuff.
What happened to Zwinky?
I have no idea.
That sucks.
What was the first game that had an end of service that you started focusing on?
Really, it was Dragalia Lost. I started, what is it, 5-6 years ago. I started my like first major job out of college, sit in the lunchroom. It was like a year after Dragalia started, and they fixed a lot of like the launch issues that I didn't like, and I played it like every day, that entire 4 years. Then all of a sudden it's like it's over, and I was like, oh shit. And then finding there was a private server, finding there was this whole group of people that really cared about the game, and then it happened again with Precon, and then it happened again with World Flipper, and then you just see, you go to the Gotcha subreddit, and it's like end of service on this, and end of service on that, and you're like, oh shit.
So being the old fart burner, right? So Meridian 59, launched in 1996.
Ooh.
One of the first mods. So it's actually still being played today on a private server. So it went into play in 2002-ish. So I'm trying to play this to the end of life and stuff like that. We picked up, still play today on my place. But between Meridian 59, Ashman's Call, the first WoW, there's so many other games out there waiting on with you folks.
Yeah.
That are still being played out there on private servers and stuff like that. That you just gotta go find out. So you show the artwork that's going on, but the same thing, the guys and gals that develop this stuff. I know most of the developers on the 3DO, which is the first Meridian call and stuff like that. So I'm still friends with these guys and stuff that develop. They come from California at the time of but it's amazing. These games are still played today.
Yeah.
I mean, like today, I was online today playing Meridian 59.
Yeah.
1996. It's older than most people in the room, right?
Yeah, and that's why this is all important, because it's like there's a community somewhere
It is.
that wants to play that game.
You just gotta find the niche and stuff like that. And so, a lot of folks and stuff that we drag into these games and private servers and stuff like that. When you go to the museum across here, you see all the people playing these games.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. It's just amazing that these games are still going on that you want to play.
Yeah, that's why it's so important.
One might argue that there's video game history that they're erasing. What would you say to that?
I would say that they are, right? End of service in games removes them from, potentially if there isn't that group ready to rip all those assets and get those servers, right, is you're erasing gamer history, right? And there is actually a panel that my partner is doing tomorrow at 7:30? 7:30 about just digital media and preservation. So feel free to go to that if this all hits that same thing.
I'm gonna go to that one.
Any other comments, questions?
I was about to also bring up like infrastructure costs in regards to maintaining servers. Because the thing is that a lot of companies, they just can't spend the money to keep a server running year after year with the increasing costs and stuff like that. Now that also comes into profitability.
Yep.
And the thing is becoming more expensive. Trying to maintain a server when you have a dwindling player base. Unfortunately, a lot of these large companies have to decide.
Oh yeah, they don't care about the assets. Yeah.
Do I need to focus on these new games and just kill the old games and stuff like that? So it's kind of like worse because we have large companies maintaining these games for like stuff. The Crew, which is a popular racing game that had to be built, they closed down the servers. It's like, okay, where do we go from here?
Yeah. And that's like part of the thing too is like, right, with these private servers, there's a cost, right? But these are multi-billion-dollar corporations. And so you just know that there's some MBA at the top who doesn't give a shit, and they say, oh, we're not making the expected ROI on this game, and they axe it. They don't care about, like, the Nintendo eShop's a great example, right? The sheer volume of games on that, the sheer volume of just accessibility to the stuff. Nintendo, because, you're right, keeping it running for the people that want to get on the 3DS doesn't make any sense anymore. But there's a higher goal than that, and it's, hey, how else are we going to get the third final ending of Fire Emblem Fates? You can't get that right now. You can't, right? So.
Plus, these corporations need to think about open sourcing the server aspect of it so that you can maintain that, create private servers so that people can still buy the game and give the companies
Money to the game.
It's just that they just don't think about giving.
No, they're going to hold that. So. It is counterside? No, there are several husbandos. Now, they do have skins to turn the husbandos into waifus, which is pretty funny. But, and some of them, and most of the husbandos that they do, it is like still like 90% to 10%, but the 10% that they do release are usable. There's like Jake, Stormwalker, he's real good. Kyrion's still a top tier unit, right? So, and it's if you want to dip in the PvP aspect of the game, it's fine. It's almost all PvE engine. There's a lot of fun stuff to do with that. So, right, you don't have to like chase the meta if you want to.
Recommendation for another slide possibly after the presentation. Are you familiar with a game called Tabula Rasa? About 15 years ago?
I am not.
That they literally destroyed it in the final hours. So it was a sci-fi MMO. It sadly didn't really find its legs. But they decided, okay, well, instead of going finally tonight, we're going to go out with a bang. So they started spawning elite units and
Just everywhere?
and just overran all the servers in the final.
Well, it's kind of like, I mean, you could even consider the original Final Fantasy XIV an end of service, right? They axed it and they made a Realm Reborn, probably very similar.
Yeah.
But,
What is the ideal ecosystem for a faction game or live service game?
so that's actually a really good question. So, right, we talk about profitability and whatnot. So, one aspect of it in terms of like ecosystem is you need to have something out there for whales, aka people who spend a lot of money to do. Whether it's in some games they do an awful something like a VIP system where the more you spend you get VIP levels and then you get extra bonuses, and it's kind of really messed up. There's generally PvP is how you rake in whales, right? Or a bunch of waifus, one of those two. Yeah. So, hey, you got your PvP, okay, the whales can just go way hard, spend a boatload of money, and just stomp on people. And then something like, let's say Genshin, Zenless Zone Zero, Honkai, like that's all PvE, but they make a bunch of really nice characters that you want to pull for, and they have like all the psychology between gambling, right? Oh, 90 pulls. Oh, if you get closer, you get a bit better chance. But then, whales need to flex, right? So you also need to have a massive, not whale player base, because if there's nobody to flex on, the whales will leave and go to the next game. And it's very funny because it's like the free-to-play players need the whales. The whales, without knowing it, need the free-to-play players. And so that's usually when player base dwindles. Now, as we saw some of the old games, they probably just have a super dedicated Leviathan that's just cashing out money. But yeah, it's a very unique balance to keep both sides of the coin happy.
I guess my question is more based off of like what can you do to save a dying game like realistically? Like you definitely touched on it, which is like fantastic. But like how can players understand that like a game is going to go under? Like you can buy merch, you can do all of this stuff, but like realistically they need to like do advertisements, do all of the stuff you were just talking about like literally 5 seconds ago. What's the best way to go about that to like realistically get everybody on board to like do the thing that they need? Because I don't know, like, is buying merch enough, essentially?
Technically, no, right? And that's really where you can't, right? So the other thing is you spend a bunch of money, right? And that does help, right? The more you spend, the developers can maintain those servers. But at the end of the day, right? Someone, right? Somebody has a cutoff in their brain that says if we don't make X schmeckles this month, right, we're axing the game. And that's just, which is like each month you can see it on like the Gotcha Gaming subreddit. They'll actually put out a earnings report for each game. And now it's funny because some of them are like, oh, this is worse this month than last month. End of service. They just immediately jump to that. Yeah, the best possible thing, like realistically, is a very bizarre thing. It's like if somehow you were a super popular, whatever stream, or you have a massive influential player base, and those influential player base can influence people to play the game. That is probably the only meaningful thing that an individual can do outside the company. Like one thing with like Counterside that I'm like annoyed with, in terms of things, is like the game's great. I have never seen a single ad on YouTube or whatever. And I know advertising's expensive. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But like, if the company doesn't advertise it,
Never saw an ad for this.
right, you're never gonna see it or play it. It's a great game. Everyone's super hyped on launch, and it's been great. But right, the company has decisions and stuff, and you know, I could try.
It goes beyond that. So when a game launches, all right, so most companies, as soon as the game launches, all the developers are gone. They're fired. Right? 'Cause it's done. They've already done it. So it's basically dealing with the care and feeding of it, whatever. So a game launches, the developers are either fired or moved on over the project. So that game is now going along until it makes as much money as it can, and then they're done.
Yeah.
So everybody who's developed all those games are on either another project or another company.
Yeah, and I think that's probably a lot more true with older games. With the modern
No, it's
live service, there's probably a lot more people staying. Now I know they go on other projects, like Destiny's getting strangled by Bungie because they're basically took everybody from Destiny who's their actual golden egg, and they're putting on Marathon or whatever thing.
So everybody who's developed the game has moved on to another project, whatever, because it's done.
Yeah.
So
I can offer an anecdote to your question earlier. about
Sure. Yeah.
Helping to save this stuff. Demon's Souls is a great example of that too, because the multiplayer for that was supposed to end like 4 years after the game release, but the community rallied together and basically started getting word about, hey, we're going to have this big event where we try to get as many of our friends on all at once so that we have as much traffic as possible during the final days. And from software, they saw the spike in engagement levels and they're like, oh, well, let's keep this going for a little bit longer. And so eventually, after a couple of weeks of seeing the traffic not take off, they decided, okay, I guess
We'll keep it going. Yeah.
going for a bit. And that happened not once, not twice, but 3 times across the span of, I think it lasted a total of 8 years before they finally did this.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. The second you see Joker and Panther in your game. Realistically, in terms of like actual like signs, it's really hard to tell because, right, it's all smoke and mirrors behind the corporation. Now there are some things where it's like as you are approaching maybe like the end of a story, like with World Flipper and Dragalia, they kind of reach the end of the main story, so you're like, oh shit, like, yeah, they could probably have done stuff to keep it rolling, but then they're kind of probably grasping at straws, and it might not have ended as good as it could have. So if your game like really is reaching a story conclusion, and things haven't been like crazy in terms of monetization and updates, you'd be like, okay, it might be happening. Yeah. Yeah, and so I think like they had to do that with like World Flipper. They had to catch up to the JP server to get the story done, and then even though we know the JP server was ending like a year in advance. That one.
Okay. Yeah.
I've also heard the term game as a service. That's interchangeable with
Yeah, that's pretty much interchangeable with the live service thing. Is like everything nowadays is basically instead of offering you a physical game, you go, you buy it, and like a Pokemon cartridge, right? You go, you buy it, you have the game. The service of me providing you Overwatch and you get to log in for free and play it, that is the service that I'm providing to you, sort of thing.
So there were a lot of questions about preservation and how to save these things. Sorry, my voice is kind of dead.
No problem.
So I'm with the Video Game Foundation. I just wanted to add a little insight on this. Something about you mentioned assets and all that. One of the things we can recommend a lot of is just more footage of the games. Even if there is a private server, we do give those save maintenance issues you mentioned. And also, it's not the same thing. Like having an empty shell of a game is not the same thing as playing it. So like, if I wanted to study gotcha games in 25 years, having footage of how people interact with the games is so really cool to understand
And that's actually like a good point, because like I did that with Counterside. They actually did a Hololive collab, and they had a special login sequence where they had all the Hololive VN characters, and after you log in once, you don't get to see the video again. So I booted up, I had my screen recording on, and I'm sure that whenever it happens, end of service for Counterside, if you don't have that recording, they might be able to get it. With the Dragula's private server, I know they're still trying to add like character stories, animations, and some stuff that like, hey, did anybody rip this? Did anybody get this so we can implement it into the private server, right? And so yeah, footage is a perfect example of maintaining that.
Is there any hope? EOS is down and out of count. Is there any hope for it to be revived?
Yes and no. In its probably base format, no. So, for example, a couple of them. Like, well, we'll talk about like Final Fantasy 14, right? Technically, Final Fantasy 14.
Free Realms, remember that?
No.
Called Penguin?
Club Penguin.
No, Concord?
Yeah, like so, they could reboot it. So like Final Fantasy 14, technically end of service, and then came back as A Realm Reborn. Basically a second, like brand new game, even though it's the same game. Where is it? Princess Connect. Well, if you notice, Redive, right? There was a Princess Connect title prior to Redive, and I believe that ended service. Then they made Redive, and then they went ahead with that. So no one's ever going to probably take, like, another publisher's probably not going to pick up Princess Connect Redive and start an English server again.
Unless it gets popular.
Unless somehow it absolutely explodes.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of then bureaucratic red tape. So like, for example, Dragalia Lost, right? Even though Cygames owns or like developed Dragalia Lost, because it was probably published through Nintendo, they probably got their grubby little paws on the IP, and so I haven't seen like a single thing come out of Cygames about Dragalia Lost. They have a bunch of things. They got fighting games, they got Grand Blue, they got Shadowverse Evolve and Shadowverse, and you don't see a single ounce of Dragalia Lost. Probably because all bureaucratic red tape with the publisher and developer not.
Right.
Yeah, but the same thing also happened when they had like Animal Game continued doing it really was just like a small corner of like a couple tiny pieces of art.
Yeah, but like Shadowverse Evolved would be perfect for Dragalia Lost. They have like 6 classes, 5 crafts. You have 5 main characters with elements. It'd been perfect, but they just don't do it.
If there's ever been a Dreamcast game that you want to play online, have ever passed now, it's never been a better time to do it. Flycast has got DC network built in with the emulator. You don't even need a Dreamcast. Get the emulator, take the game anybody wants, but online you can drive play online.
Yeah, and like a good point, because like a lot of this, I use mobile games because the speed at which mobile games were developed and then die, we kind of get to see the life cycle in advance. Where primary titles, right? You don't, when you're playing your Call of Duty, your Overwatch 2, let's say, you don't really think about it, right? You're just like, I'm gonna play Overwatch. I'm gonna play Overwatch, and then Overwatch is gonna get axed. So that life might be longer. It might be 10 years. It might be 15. I like Heroes of the Storm is still running. I don't know if anybody plays that on Blizzard. It is, but like it will probably end a service.
You know what? Overwatch 1.
Yeah, I think it might still be available. But, so, it does evolve much past just the mobile games. And so stuff like emulators, however you get your games, not going to talk about it, but there is the high seas. But preserving that, maintaining that after the game's no longer playable is super important. Alrighty. If that's no more questions or comments,
No more questions? No more questions?
Mob and Nogi.
I used to play Ragnarok a lot, and that's probably a similar age to that, and that's still up there.
Probably, yeah. There's a couple really old MMOs that are just crunching. There's got to be like literally like a group of 10 people that are just like cash every day.
You could resurrect any game that had iOS 14.
I mean, I think how much I spoke about it, it'd probably be Dragalia Lost. It's like there's other games that have ended service, but personally, I never played Club Penguin. But personally, Dragalia Lost was, it's a little bit further, it was such a good game. I think if anybody really played it, and they could have made an offline version and it would have been totally awesome, right? It's basically Monster Hunter, but in like a mobile RPG. It's just boss fights all the way down. And it's so fun. and the characters are awesome. Even if they just released the IP, if Nintendo said, all right, side games, do what you want with Dragalia Lost, and then they just started collabing it with all their other IPs, that'd probably be enough to make me happy. So at least it's alive, but it'd probably be this. Other than that, it'd probably be Precon, Princess Connect. That was a really nice game. It was cute, it was fun, but the fact that it died after a year, and you have like 7 years of like, oh, there's 6 more years of game I could have played, and I can't play it unless I know Japanese or have like a weird built-in translator. Oh, that too. So in Dragalia Lost, there was the Hinamoto arc, which was like New Year's, Chinese New Year. So they had the Boar Clan, the Rooster Clan, and before End of Service, like before they even announced it, like we had like 8 more clans to go through. They even showed all the characters. We're like, oh, we're gonna get. No, gone. That's probably the biggest regret. They finished the story, but we did not get to finish the Hinamoto arc, and that is probably even they just resurrected to do the Hinamoto arc and get those characters. That'd been worth it. Yeah, just come on, just put them in there and be like, this is what it is. All right. Anywho, thank you all for coming. I appreciate you spending your Friday night. I like all the questions and comments. Now, go out there, go to the arcade, get drunk, do whatever you want to do. But I'm done.